The blizzard came out of nowhere that February evening in 1883, turning the Texas Panhandle into a white nightmare that swallowed everything in its path. And Sarah Adams knew with terrible certainty that her baby was coming tonight, whether she found shelter or not. She had been traveling alone for 3 days now, ever since she fled from the boarding house in Amarillo, where the landlady had discovered her condition and threatened to turn her out into the street. The father of her child was long gone, a smooth-talking gambler who had promised her the world and left her with nothing but shame and a growing belly. At 22 years old, Sarah had no family to turn to, no money beyond the few coins sewn into her dress hem, and no plan beyond getting far enough away that no one would know her story. The horse she had borrowed from a kind, stable hand had thrown a shoe that morning, and she had been forced to let the animal go, hoping it would find its way back to town. She continued on foot, her carpetbag growing heavier with each step, her body aching in ways that terrified her. By late afternoon, the first flakes began to fall, gentle and deceptive. Within an hour, the wind picked up, and the snow came down so thick she could barely see 5 feet ahead. The pains had started just after nightfall. Sarah recognized them from helping her mother deliver her younger siblings years ago, back when she still had a family, before the fever took them all. These were not the false pains she had felt before. These were real, insistent, and growing stronger by the minute. Through the howling wind, she spotted the dark shape of a structure. A barn, old and weathered, but standing solid against the storm. Sarah stumbled toward it, her hands pressed against her swollen belly, her breath coming in short gasps that had nothing to do with the cold. The barn door was partially open, banging against its frame in the wind. She slipped inside, pulling the door closed behind her as best she could. The interior was dark and smelled of old hay and animal warmth, though no livestock occupied the stalls now. Sarah felt her way along the wall until she found a pile of relatively clean straw in the corner. She collapsed onto it, her body trembling from cold and fear and pain. Another contraction seized her, stronger this time, and she bit down on her gloved hand to keep from crying out. She was going to have this baby alone in a barn during a blizzard. The irony was not lost on her, and she might have laughed if she had the breath for it. Instead, she fumbled with the matches in her bag, managing to light the small candle stub she had been saving. The flickering light revealed her temporary sanctuary, and she began to prepare as best she could with what little she had. Lucas Bennett had been riding for the Bar M Ranch for 5 years, ever since he was 19 years old and needed to escape the memory of his parents' farm being foreclosed. At 24, he was considered one of the best hands in the Panhandle, known for his skill with difficult horses and his unwavering reliability. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that always seemed to need cutting and gray eyes that noticed everything. The other ranch hands teased him about being too serious, too focused on work, never joining them on their trips into town to drink and gamble and chase women. The truth was that Lucas had seen what carelessness could do. He had watched his father drink away their farm, had seen his mother work herself to death trying to hold things together. He had promised himself he would be different, steady and dependable, building something solid before he ever thought about settling down. He saved his wages, kept to himself, and earned the respect of every man he worked with, even if they did not understand him. The storm had caught him by surprise. He had been checking the line shacks on the northern edge of the ranch property, making sure they were stocked for winter, when the sky opened up and turned the world white. His horse, a steady buckskin named Dusty, had excellent instincts, and Lucas trusted the animal to find shelter. They had traveled slowly through the blinding snow for what felt like hours when Dusty's ears pricked forward, and the horse turned decisively towards something Lucas could not yet see. The old Miller barn materialized out of the white. Lucas knew it well. The property had been abandoned 2 years ago when Old Man Miller died without heirs, and the bank had not yet found a buyer for the land. The ranch hands sometimes used the barn for shelter when they were working this section of the range. Lucas dismounted and led Dusty toward the door, noting with surprise that it was already closed. Perhaps another cowboy had taken shelter here. He pulled the door open and stepped inside, shaking the snow from his coat. Dusty followed, grateful for the respite from the wind. Lucas was reaching up to brush the snow from his hat when he heard it, a sound so unexpected that he froze completely. A woman's muffled cry, tight with pain and fear. Lucas's hand went instinctively to the gun at his hip, then dropped away as he heard the sound again. That was not the cry of someone dangerous. That was someone in terrible trouble. He moved deeper into the barn, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, and that was when he saw the faint glow of a candle in the far corner. What he found there would be burned into his memory forever. A woman, young and pale, lying in the straw with her coat spread beneath her and her skirts hiked up. Her face was contorted with pain, her dark blonde hair plastered to her forehead with sweat despite the cold. And it was immediately, terribly clear what was happening. She was having a baby. Right now. Alone. Their eyes met and Lucas saw the fear in her blue-green gaze, the desperate animal panic of a creature trapped and vulnerable. She tried to speak, but another contraction seized her, and she curled onto her side, her hands fisting in the straw. Lucas had helped birth plenty of calves and foals in his years on the ranch. He had even assisted when one of the Mexican ranch hands' wives had her baby come early during roundup, though the camp cook's wife had done most of the actual work while Lucas fetched water and blankets. He was not entirely ignorant, but he was also keenly aware that this was far outside anything he had ever expected to deal with. But there was no one else. The storm raged outside, and this woman needed help immediately. He moved quickly to Dusty, unsaddling the horse and pulling out his bedroll and supplies. He had a canteen of water, some rope, a clean shirt in his saddlebag, and a bottle of whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes. It was not much, but it would have to do. "Madam," he said, keeping his voice low and steady as he approached. "My name is Lucas Bennett. I am a ranch hand from the barn. I am going to help you through this." Sarah looked up at him, this tall stranger with snow melting in his dark hair and calm gray eyes, and something in his voice made her want to believe him. She managed to nod, then gasped as another contraction rolled through her. "How long have you been laboring?" Lucas asked, kneeling beside her and spreading his bedroll nearby. "Since the storm started," she managed between breaths. "A few hours, maybe." Lucas nodded. That was not too long for a first baby if he remembered correctly. "Have your waters broken?" She nodded, her face flushing with embarrassment despite the circumstances. "That is all right," Lucas said, his voice gentle. "There is no shame here. We are just going to get through this, you and me together. Can you tell me your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Adams." "Well, Miss Adams, it is nice to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." He offered her a small smile, and she saw kindness in his weathered face. "I need to check how far along you are. Is that all right?" Sarah nodded again, too exhausted and frightened to care about propriety. Lucas washed his hands with some of the snow he had brought in and a splash of whiskey, then carefully examined her. He had seen enough animal births to understand the basics, and what he found both relieved and terrified him. "The baby is coming soon," he said, pulling his coat off and rolling up his sleeves. "You are doing fine, Sarah. Everything is going to be all right. She wanted to believe him. She had to believe him because the alternative was unthinkable. Another contraction came, stronger than before, and Lucas took her hand, letting her squeeze until he thought his bones might break. "That is it," he encouraged. "Breathe through it. You are stronger than you know." The hours that followed were the longest of both their lives. Lucas worked with steady hands and a calm voice, talking Sarah through each contraction, offering her sips of water, and using his clean shirt to wipe her face. He lit his own lantern to give them more light, and he arranged the straw and blankets to create a cleaner space for the baby. Between contractions, they talked in fragments. Lucas learned that Sarah had no family, that she had been running from shame and judgment, that she was terrified of what would happen after the baby came. He told her about the ranch, about his parents, about how sometimes life took you down roads you never expected, but that did not mean those roads could not lead somewhere good. "I was supposed to take over my father's farm," he said during one of the calmer moments. "Had my whole life planned out. Then it all fell apart and I ended up here. Best thing that ever happened to me, even though it did not feel that way at the time." Sarah looked at him through pain-glazed eyes. "You think this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to me?" "I think," Lucas said carefully, "that baby you are about to bring into the world might just be the best thing that ever happened to both of you. And I think you are a hell of a lot braver than you give yourself credit for." The word settled something in Sarah's chest, some small seed of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. She was not alone. This stranger with gentle hands and a steady voice was here, and he was not running away. He was not judging her. He was just helping, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The storm howled outside, and the candle burned lower. Lucas kept stoking the small fire he had built in a cleared space, using old wood scraps from the barn to keep them warm. Dusty stood patiently in a stall, occasionally nickering softly as if offering encouragement. Finally, as the night stretched toward morning, though they could not see it through the storm, Sarah felt a change. The pressure was different, more urgent, and she knew instinctively that the time had come. "Lucas," she gasped, and he was beside her immediately. "I know," he said. "It is time. You can do this, Sarah. You are going to meet your baby soon." The next part was agony and miracle combined. Sarah pushed with everything she had, following Lucas's instructions, drawing strength from his unwavering presence. He coached her through each push, his voice never wavering, his hands ready to catch the new life about to enter the world. And then, in the darkest hour of the night, in a barn in the middle of a Texas blizzard, a baby's cry pierced the air. Lucas caught the tiny, slippery infant with practiced hands, having delivered enough foals to know how to handle the newborn. It was a boy, small but with a powerful set of lungs. Lucas quickly used his knife to cut the cord, tying it off as he had seen done before. He wrapped the baby in his warmest shirt, rubbing the tiny body gently to stimulate breathing and warmth. "It is a boy," he said, his voice thick with emotion he had not expected to feel. "Sarah, you have a son." He placed the baby on Sarah's chest, and she wrapped her arms around the tiny bundle, tears streaming down her face. The baby quieted against her warmth, his small face screwing up as he tried to figure out this strange new world he had entered. "Hello," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "Hello, little one." Lucas sat back on his heels, suddenly aware that his hands were shaking. He had just helped deliver a human baby. A whole new person had just come into the world, and he had been part of it. The magnitude of the moment crashed over him, and he had to look away for a second to compose himself. But there was still work to do. He helped Sarah through the delivery of the afterbirth, made sure she was not bleeding too heavily, and got her into dry clothes from his saddlebag. His extra clothes were far too big for her, but they were clean and dry, and that was what mattered. He bundled her and the baby in all the blankets he had, adding his coat on top. The baby needed to nurse, and Lucas turned away to give them privacy, busying himself with tending to Dusty and building up the fire. When he glanced back, he saw Sarah with the baby at her breast, a look of wonder and terror on her face. "He is beautiful," Lucas said softly. "He is so small," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to be a mother." "You just brought a baby into the world during a blizzard in a barn," Lucas pointed out. "I think you can handle anything." Sarah let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob. "I have nothing. No home, no money, no family. What am I going to do?" Lucas was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside the barn, with the fire crackling and the baby making soft sounds, there was a strange sense of peace. Something had shifted in Lucas during the past few hours, something fundamental that he could not quite name yet. He had looked into Sarah's eyes and seen strength and determination beneath the fear. He had held new life in his hands and felt the weight of responsibility and possibility. "You will figure it out," he said finally. "And you will not be alone." Sarah looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the storm will pass by morning and I will take you back to the ranch. The owner, Mr. Morrison, he and his wife are good people. They need help at the main house, and Mrs. Morrison has been wanting a companion. You could work there, live there. The baby would be safe and warm." "They would not want someone like me," Sarah said bitterly. "An unwed mother, no references, no reputation. They will want someone who is willing to work hard and who I vouch for," Lucas said firmly. "And I am vouching for you, Sarah Adams. You are one of the bravest people I have ever met." Sarah stared at him, this stranger who had appeared out of a blizzard and helped her through the most terrifying night of her life. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" Lucas met her gaze, and what she saw there made her breath catch. There was no pity in his eyes, no judgment. There was only a quiet respect and something else, something warmer that neither of them was quite ready to name yet. "Because everyone deserves a chance," he said simply. "And because I want to." They spent the rest of the night in the barn, taking turns sleeping while one watched the fire and the baby. The storm finally began to ease near dawn, and by the time full light came, the snow had stopped falling. The world outside was transformed, buried under 2 feet of fresh powder that glittered in the weak winter sun. Lucas saddled Dusty and helped Sarah mount, then handed the baby up to her. He led the horse slowly through the deep snow, breaking trail on foot. The journey back to the bar took most of the day, and by the time they reached the ranch house, Sarah was exhausted and the baby was fussing with hunger. Mrs. Morrison took one look at the scene, Lucas snow-covered and determined, Sarah pale and trembling with a newborn in her arms, and immediately took charge. Within minutes, Sarah was settled in a warm bedroom with hot food and clean clothes, and Mrs. Morrison was cooing over the baby with the expertise of a woman who had raised 4 children of her own. Mr. Morrison pulled Lucas aside in the kitchen. "You want to tell me what happened out there?" Lucas told him everything, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. Mr. Morrison listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful. "You did good, son," he said finally. "Real good. And you were right to bring her here. Martha has been lonely since our youngest went off to school. She will be happy to have a young woman around and a baby too. We can always use help at the house." "She is a good woman, sir," Lucas said. "She just had some bad luck." "We have all had bad luck at one time or another," Mr. Morrison replied. "It is what we do after that counts. She can stay as long as she needs. And Lucas, you did a fine thing last night. I am proud of you." The words settled warm in Lucas's chest as he headed to the bunkhouse to finally get some sleep. But as he lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, sleep would not come. He kept thinking about Sarah, about the strength in her eyes, about the way she had looked at her baby with such fierce love. He kept thinking about the strange feeling that had come over him in that barn, the sense that his life had just changed direction in ways he could not yet fully understand. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Sarah recovered from the birth quickly, her youth and natural resilience serving her well. She threw herself into helping Mrs. Morrison with the household, grateful for the work and the safety. The baby, whom she named James after her father, thrived. He was a good baby, quiet and content, and everyone at the ranch fell in love with him. Lucas found excuses to come to the main house more often than necessary. He brought firewood when the pile was already full. He offered to fix things that were not broken. He always asked after Sarah and the baby, trying to sound casual and probably failing miserably based on the knowing looks the other ranch hands gave him. Sarah noticed. How could she not? Lucas was not subtle, and she found herself watching for him, looking forward to his visits. He would sit with her in the evenings when his work was done, talking about his day or listening to her stories about growing up back east. He was gentle with little James, letting the baby wrap tiny fingers around his large, calloused ones. "You are good with him," Sarah said one evening, watching Lucas hold James with surprising confidence. "I have had practice," Lucas replied, smiling down at the baby. "Lots of animals born on a ranch. Not the same, I know, but it helps." "It is more than that," Sarah said softly. "You care. That is not something you can practice." Lucas looked up at her, and the moment stretched between them, heavy with things neither was quite ready to say. The firelight caught in Sarah's hair, turning it to gold, and Lucas thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Not because she was conventionally pretty, though she was, but because of the light that shone from within her, the strength and determination that she wore like armor. "He is a special little fellow," Lucas said finally, looking back down at James. "And he has a special mother." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Lucas, I need to say thank you properly. You saved our lives that night, both of us. I do not know how I can ever repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Lucas said firmly. "I did what anyone would have done." "But anyone did not do it," Sarah insisted. "You did. You could have ridden past that barn. You could have left when you saw what was happening. But you stayed, and you helped me, and you did not judge me." Her voice broke slightly. "You have no idea what that means to me." Lucas handed James back to her gently, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. "I think I do," he said quietly. "And Sarah, for what it is worth, I am glad I was the one who found you that night. I cannot imagine not knowing you and James now." The words hung in the air between them, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest, some wall she had built around her heart beginning to crack. She had been so hurt, so betrayed by James's father, that she had sworn she would never trust another man again. But Lucas was making it very hard to keep that promise. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, their friendship deepened into something more. Lucas taught Sarah to ride properly, taking her out on gentle trail rides while Mrs. Morrison watched James. He showed her the ranch, the wide open spaces that he loved, the way the land looked when the sun rose over the distant mesas. He told her his dreams of one day having his own small ranch, nothing fancy, just enough land to run some cattle and horses and build a real home. Sarah shared her own carefully guarded dreams. She wanted security for James, yes, but she also wanted more. She wanted to be more than just a servant, more than someone defined by her mistakes. She wanted to learn, to grow, to build something real. Mrs. Morrison had been teaching her to read better, to work with numbers. Mr. Morrison let her help with the ranch bookkeeping, and she had a natural head for it. "You are good at this," Mr. Morrison told her one afternoon, reviewing her careful figures. "Better than me, truth be told. You have a mind for business." The praise meant more to Sarah than she could express. For the first time since she had fled Amarillo, she felt like she was building something, becoming someone beyond her past. But it was Lucas who truly saw her, all of her, and did not look away. He knew her story, knew about James's father, knew about the shame and the fear. And none of it changed the way he looked at her, the quiet respect and growing affection in his eyes. One evening in April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lucas finally found the courage to speak what had been growing in his heart for months. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something." She looked at him, noting the nervous set to his shoulders. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. Everything is right, actually, and that is what I need to talk about." He took a deep breath. "I am not a man who is good with fancy words. I am just a cowboy, and I probably do not have any business saying what I am about to say, but I cannot keep it in anymore." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. "Lucas, I love you," he said simply, turning to face her fully. "I love you, and I love James like he was my own son. I know it has not been that long, and I know you have been hurt before. I know you have every reason not to trust another man. But Sarah, I am not him. I am not going anywhere. And I want to build a life with you if you will have me." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to throw herself into his arms and accept the safety and love he offered. But another part, the part that had been broken and betrayed, held her back. "Lucas, I care for you so much," she said carefully. "But I am scared. James's father said he loved me too. He made promises and then he left without looking back. How do I know you are different?" "Because I am already here," Lucas said, his voice steady. "I have been here every day since the moment I found you. I have had plenty of chances to walk away, and I have not taken a single one. I do not want to walk away, Sarah. I want to walk beside you for the rest of my life." "What about James?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. "He is not your son." "He is if you will let him be," Lucas replied. "I want to be his father, Sarah. I want to teach him to ride, to work with his hands, to be a good man. I want to be there for his first word, his first step, all of it. If you will let me." The tears spilled over, running down Sarah's cheeks. "I do not have anything to offer you. No dowry, no reputation, just a baby and a past full of mistakes." Lucas reached out and gently wiped her tears away with his thumb. "You have everything I want. Your strength, your courage, your heart. That is all I need." Sarah looked into his gray eyes and saw only truth there, only love and patience and steadiness. This man had caught her baby in a barn during a blizzard. He had vouched for her when he had no reason to trust her. He had spent months proving with actions, not just words, that he meant what he said. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Lucas, I love you too." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her like she was something precious. They sat there on the porch as the stars came out, wrapped in each other's warmth, and Sarah felt truly safe for the first time in years. They were married a month later in a simple ceremony in the ranch house parlor. Sarah wore a dress that Mrs. Morrison had helped her make, pale blue with white lace at the collar. Lucas wore his best suit, his hair freshly cut, his face shining with happiness. James, now 4 months old and already showing signs of his mother's blue-green eyes, gurgled contentedly in Mrs. Morrison's arms throughout the ceremony. Mr. Morrison gave Sarah away, and there was not a dry eye in the room when Lucas slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love and protect her and James for the rest of his days. When he kissed her, sealing their vows, Sarah felt the last of her walls crumble. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. The Morrisons gave them a small cabin on the ranch property as a wedding gift. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. Lucas had spent his saved wages furnishing it, building a cradle for James and a proper bed for them. Sarah sewed curtains and planted flowers, making it into a real home. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be true. Lucas worked hard on the ranch, proving himself over and over. Mr. Morrison began talking about making him foreman when the current one retired in a few years. Sarah continued helping with the ranch books, and Mrs. Morrison paid her a small wage that she saved carefully. James grew like a weed, crawling and then toddling, babbling nonsense that gradually turned into real words. His first word was "Mama," which made Sarah cry. His second word was "Papa," said while reaching his chubby arms up to Lucas, and that made Lucas cry too, though he denied it afterward. "He called me Papa," Lucas said that night, his voice full of wonder. "He thinks I am his father." "You are his father," Sarah said firmly, curling against her husband's side. "In every way that matters. Biology does not make a father, Lucas. Love does. And James loves you." "I love him too," Lucas whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." Sarah understood. She had been so afraid to love again, so certain that opening her heart would only lead to more pain. But Lucas had proven day after day that real love was not about pretty words or grand gestures. It was about showing up. It was about the steady presence, the small kindnesses, the unwavering commitment even when things were hard, and things did get hard sometimes. Their first year of marriage was not without its challenges. Money was tight, especially when Lucas's horse came up lame and he had to spend precious savings on a new mount. Sarah got sick with fever one winter, and Lucas sat up with her for 3 nights straight, bathing her face and forcing her to drink water, terrified he might lose her. But they weathered every storm together, growing stronger with each challenge. Lucas taught Sarah to shoot, insisted she learn to defend herself and James if he was ever not there. Sarah taught Lucas to read better, patient with his struggles, proud of his progress. They built a life together, piece by piece, dream by dream. When James was 2 years old, Sarah realized she was pregnant again. The discovery brought a rush of complicated emotions. She was thrilled at the prospect of giving Lucas a biological child, a baby that was truly theirs. But she was also terrified, remembering the pain and fear of that night in the barn. Lucas found her crying in their kitchen one morning after she had been sick for the 3rd day in a row. "Sarah, what is wrong? Are you ill?" She looked up at him, her eyes red. "I am pregnant." Lucas's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, joy, concern, before settling on tender. "That is wonderful news," he said carefully. "Is it not?" "It is," Sarah said quickly. "It is, I promise. I am happy, I am just scared. Last time in the barn, it was so hard and I was alone, and if you had not found me." She could not finish the sentence. Lucas knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "You are not alone now, you will never be alone again. And this time, you will have a real doctor and a real bed and me right there with you the whole time. I promise, Sarah. We are going to do this together." And they did. The pregnancy was easier than Sarah's first, perhaps because she was not running and starving and terrified. She had good food, a warm home, and a husband who doted on her shamelessly. Lucas treated her like she was made of spun glass, constantly worried she was overdoing it. "I am pregnant, not dying," Sarah laughed one day when he insisted on carrying a basket that could not have weighed more than 5 pounds. "I know," Lucas said, not setting the basket down, "but you are carrying precious cargo and I am not taking any chances." James was excited about becoming a big brother, though Sarah suspected he did not fully understand what that meant. He liked to pat her growing belly and babble to the baby, which never failed to make both his parents smile. The baby came in early autumn of 1885, on a clear, warm day that bore no resemblance to that terrible blizzard 3 years earlier. This time, Sarah labored in their cabin with the local midwife attending, Mrs. Morrison holding her hand, and Lucas pacing outside like a caged animal until the midwife finally took pity on him and let him in. He was by Sarah's side in an instant, taking her hand, murmuring encouragement. And when their daughter came into the world, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Lucas cut the cord himself with trembling hands. "A girl," the midwife announced. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Lucas looked at his daughter, at his wife, at this family he had somehow been blessed with, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. "She is perfect," he managed. They named her Emma after Lucas's mother. She had Sarah's blonde hair and Lucas's gray eyes, and from the start, she had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. James took to his role as big brother with enthusiasm, always wanting to help with the baby, showing her his toys even though she was far too young to appreciate them. The years rolled on, marked by milestones both big and small. Lucas was made foreman of the Bar M, a promotion that came with a raise and more responsibility. Sarah started keeping books for several of the neighboring ranches as well, her reputation for accuracy and discretion spreading. They saved every penny they could, dreaming of the day they could buy their own land. When James was 6 and Emma was 3, Mr. Morrison called Lucas into his office one spring morning. "Sit down, son. I have something to discuss with you." Lucas sat, curious. Mr. Morrison looked older than he had when Lucas first started working for him, his hair now fully gray, his movements slower. But his mind was as sharp as ever. "I am getting old, Lucas," Mr. Morrison said bluntly. "Martha and I have been talking, and we are thinking about moving to town, closer to our daughters. The ranch is too much for us now." Lucas felt his heart sink. "You are selling the Bar M." "Not exactly," Mr. Morrison said, leaning back in his chair. "I am selling half of it, to you." Lucas stared at him, certain he had misheard. "What? You have been like a son to me, Lucas. You and Sarah both. I have watched you work yourselves to the bone, saving every penny, dreaming of your own place. Well, here is your chance. I will sell you half interest in the Bar M for a fair price, and you can pay it off over time. You will run the place, make the decisions. When Martha and I are gone, it will all be yours and Sarah's." Lucas could not speak. This was beyond anything he had dreamed possible. The Bar M was one of the biggest ranches in the Panhandle, thousands of acres of prime grazing land. To own even half of it with a path to full ownership was more than he had ever hoped for. "Why?" he finally managed. "Because you earned it," Mr. Morrison said simply. "Because you are the best man I know. And because I want to know the ranch will be in good hands when I am gone. So what do you say? Want to be my partner?" Lucas thought of Sarah, of their children, of the life they had built together. He thought of that night in the barn during the blizzard, of the scared young woman he had found there, of the tiny baby he had caught in his hands. Everything had led to this moment, every choice and challenge and blessing. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I would be honored." Sarah cried when he told her the news, happy tears that soaked his shirt. "We are going to have our own ranch," she whispered. "Lucas, we really made it." "We did," he agreed, holding her close. "We really did." The years that followed were full and rich. Lucas and Sarah built the Bar M into one of the most successful ranches in Texas, known for quality cattle and fair dealing. They added 3 more children to their family, 2 more boys and another girl, each one welcomed with joy and love. James grew into a fine young man, strong and kind like his stepfather. He never knew Lucas was not his biological father until he was 14, when Sarah felt he was old enough to understand the full story. She told him about that night in the barn, about the blizzard and the fear and the cowboy who had saved them both. James listened quietly, then looked at Lucas, who was waiting outside, trying not to look anxious. "Papa," James said, and Lucas looked up. "Mama told me about how you found her, about how I am not yours by blood." Lucas's face went carefully blank. "That does not change anything for me, son. You are mine. You have always been mine." "I know," James said, crossing to embrace his father, "and I am glad. I cannot imagine having any other father. You are the best man I know." Lucas held his son, this boy he had raised from infancy, and felt a peace settle over him. Blood did not make a family. Love did. Emma grew up spirited and stubborn, constantly following her father and brothers around the ranch, insisting she could do anything they could do. Lucas taught her to ride and rope, much to Sarah's amused exasperation. "She is going to be a handful when she grows up," Sarah warned. "She already is," Lucas replied, watching Emma beat her older brother in a race across the pasture. "But I would not change a thing about her." Sarah's business continued to grow. By the time she was 40, she was keeping books for half the ranches in the Panhandle and advising on financial matters. People respected her opinion, sought her counsel. She had come so far from that terrified young woman hiding in a barn, and she never forgot how far she had climbed. The Morrisons moved to town when Lucas and Sarah had been married for 15 years, and true to his word, Mr. Morrison sold them the rest of the ranch at a fair price. Before he died 5 years later, he told Lucas he was proud of him, proud of the man he had become and the family he had built. As Lucas and Sarah grew older, they made sure to pass on not just their property but their values to their children. They taught them that family was not about blood but about choice and commitment. They taught them that hard work and integrity mattered more than money or status. They taught them to help people who needed it, to never turn away someone in trouble. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The house was full of laughter and music, grandchildren running underfoot, friends and neighbors celebrating with them. As the evening wound down, Lucas and Sarah slipped away to the porch, watching the sun set over land that was theirs, built by their own hands and hard work. "You ever think about that night?" Sarah asked quietly. "The barn, the blizzard, all the time," Lucas admitted. "I think about how easily I could have missed you, how I almost kept riding. I think about what my life would have been like if I had never found you." "Empty," Sarah said, "like mine would have been without you." Lucas pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and hay and home. "I am glad that blizzard came," she said. "I am glad I ended up in that barn, because it led me to you. It led us to each other," Lucas corrected. "You saved me just as much as I saved you, Sarah. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and saving and not really living. You taught me what it meant to truly live, to love, to build something real." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, one by one, like tiny promises in the vast Texas sky. Their life had not been easy, but it had been good, full of love and purpose and meaning. James took over the day-to-day running of the ranch as Lucas and Sarah slowed down, but they remained active and involved, enjoying their grandchildren and the life they had built. Lucas taught his grandsons to ride, passed on his knowledge of the land and the cattle. Sarah taught her granddaughters to read and work with numbers, encouraged them to dream big and work hard. When Lucas was 65, he and Sarah took a trip back to the old Miller barn, the place where their story had truly begun. It was still standing, weathered and worn but solid. They stepped inside, and the memories came flooding back, vivid and immediate. "This is where you were lying," Lucas said, pointing to the corner, "right there in the straw with just a candle for light. And you came through that door like an answer to a prayer I had not even prayed," Sarah said softly. "I was so scared, Lucas. I thought I was going to die there alone." "You were never alone after that moment," Lucas said, taking her hand, "and you never will be." Sarah looked around the barn, seeing it with older, wiser eyes. It was just a building, old wood and rusted nails. But it was also sacred space, the place where her son had been born, where she had met the man who would become her husband, where her real life had begun. "Thank you," she said, turning to Lucas, "for stopping that night, for helping me, for loving me and James even when you had no reason to. Thank you for being the man you are." Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy with more dreams than sense. Thank you for building this life with me." They stayed in the barn for a while longer, talking and remembering, before riding back to their ranch, to their family, to the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. Lucas Bennett lived to be 78 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep with Sarah beside him, his children and grandchildren surrounding his bed. His last words were to Sarah, a whispered "I love you" that she would carry in her heart for the rest of her days. Sarah lived another 7 years, remaining sharp and active until the end. She spent her time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, about the night in the barn, about building a life from nothing. She made sure they understood that family was about love, not blood, that hard work and integrity mattered, that you helped people who needed it. She died on a winter day when snow was falling soft and gentle, nothing like the blizzard of that long-ago night. Her last thought was of Lucas, of his gray eyes and gentle hands, of the life they had built together. She closed her eyes in her own bed, surrounded by love, and slipped away peacefully. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passed down from parent to child, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But the foundation remained the same, built on the love between a scared young woman and a steady cowboy who had found each other during a blizzard and built something beautiful from that chance meeting. The old Miller barn eventually collapsed, wood finally surrendering to time and weather. But before it fell, Sarah's great-granddaughter commissioned a marker to be placed on the site, a simple stone with an inscription. Here, during a blizzard in February 1883, Sarah Adams gave birth to her son James with the help of cowboy Lucas Bennett. This is where their love story began, and where the Bennett family was born. Visitors to the Bar M Ranch would often stop at the marker, reading the inscription and trying to imagine that night, the storm and the fear and the miracle of birth, the stranger who became a husband and father, the woman who found courage she did not know she had. And they would understand that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best, that help can come from unexpected places, and that love, real love, is built not in moments but in days and years of showing up, of choosing each other, of building something together that can weather any storm. The legacy of Lucas and Sarah Bennett lived on in their descendants, in the values they passed down, in the stories told around dinner tables and on porch swings. They had built more than a ranch. They had built a family founded on love, resilience, and the simple truth that everyone deserves a chance, a helping hand, and someone who will stay when things get hard. Their story became legend in the Panhandle, told and retold with varying degrees of accuracy, but always with the same core truth. On a winter night in 1883, during one of the worst blizzards Texas had ever seen, two lives collided in an old barn. A woman gave birth. A cowboy helped her through it. And from that unlikely beginning grew a love that lasted a lifetime and a family that would thrive for generations. It was a reminder that our lives can change in an instant, that kindness matters, that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes the family we choose is just as important as the family we are born into. It was a story about second chances and new beginnings, about finding love when you had given up hope, about building something real and lasting from the rubble of your past. And on winter nights, when the wind howled and snow fell, the Bennett descendants would gather by the fire and tell the story again, making sure each new generation understood where they came from, what they were built on, and why it mattered. They would tell the story of Sarah and Lucas, of the barn and the blizzard and the baby born in the night, and they would feel connected to something bigger than themselves, part of a legacy of love that started with one cowboy who stopped to help a stranger and discovered that sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back.